Tonight on Ukraine Today, a night of pure terror, Russia launched massive strike on Kiev. There are people killed. Among the injured is a child. A hot response: explosions hit one of the largest Russian oil export terminals in Novorossiysk. The battlefield, despite enormous losses, Russian troops keep pushing in the Zaporizhzhia sector. Peace talks. Are there any open paths for direct contact between Zelensky and Putin, and what role could Trump play in the peace process? All this and more right now. Hi, I'm Volodymyr Rubchun. This is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Let's get to the news. 5 people were killed and dozens injured after a massive Russian strike on Kiev. Among the wounded is a 10-year-old child. The enemy used missiles and drones. Several apartment buildings across the capital were hit. In total, around 30 residential buildings were damaged. The attack also hit parts of the city's heating network, leaving several homes without heat. Here are the consequences in the Kyiv region: private property, civilian production facilities, warehouses, garages and cars were damaged. 6 people were injured, including a 7-year-old child. Cherkasy region was also hit. The enemy attacked it with drones. In Sumy, Russia struck an industrial site, sparkling a fire. All hotspots have now been extinguished. 1 person sought medical assistance. In the Kharkiv region, Russian troops used an FPV drone to kill civilians. A group of 3 was traveling on 3 makeshift motorcarts toward the village of Borova to collect pensions and humanitarian aid. Near the village of Novoplatonivka, a Russian FPV drone hit one of the carts. 2 women died on the spot, and another man died on the way to the hospital. 1 more person was wounded. Russian drones also attacked a market in Chornomorsk. In the Odessa region, 2 people were killed, 7 injured. The strike damaged schools, the central square, shop facades and private vehicles. Now to Ukraine's response. Ukrainian defense forces struck several targets in temporarily occupied Donetsk. Local channels report a possible hit on a metallurgical plant. Parts of the city experienced power outages. Detonation rocked one of Russia's largest oil export terminals in Novorossiysk. The explosions were not random. They came after a Ukrainian drone attack. The port suspended oil exports. And beyond Novorossiysk, Ukrainian drones hit an oil refinery in Saratov. The plant belongs to Rosneft's structure and supplies fuel and lubricants to the Russian army, which makes it an absolutely legitimate target. It looked like Putin got scared and fled Moscow to avoid getting hit himself. The dictator is now known to be at Valdai. But how do you explain to your circle why fearless Volodya suddenly ran away? You need to save face and avoid punishment. More on this in the report.
The secrets of Putin's offices. It turns out that the Russian dictator has been hiding for years exactly where he is and from where he governs the country.
For the past 10 years, we've constantly seen Putin in this very office. This bright functional office, covering 120 square meters, is located on the 2nd floor of the new representative building in Novo-Ogaryovo. Outside the windows, there is a 1.5 kilometers of forest. You can't just peek inside from the street. That's where Putin makes important calls, holds video conferences, and meets with people. And according to Kremlin reports, Putin spent almost the entire 2020 to 2021 pandemic working there. Or did he?
After studying dozens of hours of the program Moscow, Kremlin, Putin, archives from the Kremlin website, government procurement documents, building plans, routes of Putin and his entourage, as well as hotel bookings and business trips of state TV employees, journalists from the Sistema project have established that since 2015, exact replicas of the suburban office have been created for the dictator to conceal his actual location at any given moment.
The Kremlin uses these replicas to make it seem like Putin is working in the Moscow suburbs. In fact, much of the footage said to be from the Moscow region was actually filmed in decoy offices far from Moscow.
As of today, at least 3 absolutely identical offices are known to exist in different parts of Russia. In Novoogaryovo, in the Moscow region, the Sochi residence Bocharov-Ruchi, and in Valdai. Each of them replicates the original interior down to the smallest details. This includes the color of the walls, the arrangement of the furniture and decorative elements so that viewers cannot tell one room from another. The complex system of duplicate offices allowed the dictator to record addresses and hold meetings from different parts of the country, creating the illusion of stability and a constant presence in the same office. Despite the apparent identicalness of the rooms, journalists have uncovered small but telling differences. The height of the door handles, lines on the walls, and the arrangement of folders on the desk. It was these details that became the key to exposing the carefully concealed deception.
By drawing 2 lines, we can confidently say which room Putin is using. Here is Novoogaryovo, and here is the copy office. And again, here is the original, and here is the copy. Yes?
Since February 2023, Putin has almost stopped using the Sochi office after he began to fear strikes from Ukrainian drones. The Bocharov-Ruchi residence, once convenient and safe, turned out to be vulnerable, and the dictator began to look for more hidden and protected places to work.
Even though several air defense positions have been set up there, it's still quite close to Ukraine, and the long-range capabilities of the Ukrainian drone forces allow them to cause quite a bit of trouble there. A lot of fun, so to speak. That's why Valdai is farther away, better hidden, and the terrain there is more favorable. Well, it's in the forest, it's a residence in the woods. And in Sochi, it's a residence in the mountains in a fairly open area. But it has a view, you know what I mean? So when you build yourself a residence with a view, so you can see both the mountains and the sea, it's not just that you can see the sea, but people at sea can also see you a little bit. That's why Sochi has dropped out of the list of his 2 favorite residences. Yes?
Since the beginning of 2025, the same fate has befallen the office in Novoogaryovo, near Moscow. Now, Putin's addresses and meetings are recorded in 2 different offices, one in the Kremlin and the other at Lake Valdai, in the Novgorod region. It was there that another office was set up. Journalists claim that the Valdai residence has become the main home for Putin's secret family, unofficially formed with gymnast Alina Kabaeva. There, the dictator could hold private meetings and record addresses, passing them off as footage from the residence near Moscow. He
also has his own distinctive features. The first is a switch. It is located exactly in the center of the panel, not like in the original at Novoogaryovo or in the copy in Sochi. The second is a seam on the wall, the one behind Putin's head. It is much higher than the panel joint. This office has its own writing set, its own unique pattern on the desk, and in total, we found more than 150 photos of this office. Well, that's out of the ones we were able to identify. Let's once again show how the 3 rooms differ from each other. In all 3 rooms, the seam on the wall behind Putin is at a different height. This is how the positions of the door handles differ. This is how the thermostats are arranged in different locations. And this is what the desk and the document folder look like.
Analysis of video footage and travel routes showed that, despite the apparent work in Novoogaryovo, Putin could actually have been in any of the 3 mentioned offices. Journalists recorded how on the same day the president would appear in an office with one type of renovation, then a few hours later in another, and then back in the previous one.
Starting around 2018, a process has been underway. An absolute merging of the president's personal physical comfort, the actual body he inhabits, with the needs of the state. In other words, the king's body ceases to be a human body and becomes a vast state hyper-object within which clinics, secret residences, and a second family appear. In fact, alongside the first, he did end up divorcing his wife. And all of this no longer works in the sense of, yeah, let's at least pretend that the president follows the rules and observes the ceremonial. Instead, let's arrange everything so that it's simply convenient for the president. And
while the Kremlin creates an appearance of stability and power, in reality, the Russian dictator is afraid. He is afraid of Ukrainian attacks, afraid of losing power, afraid of any signs of instability.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now is the time to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and share a few videos. It takes less than a minute and really helps the channel grow. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. In Karelia, Russian Su-30 tactical aircraft crashed, according to Russian media. Open source information says the crew died. The cause of the crash is still unknown. Over the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 1,040 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's already 1,156,400 enemy fighters. Ukrainian defense forces also destroyed 2 Russian armored vehicles, 35 artillery systems and dozens more pieces of enemy equipment. More on the battlefield situation in the report.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces struck a thermal power plant in Oryol, Russia. It is reported that Ukrainian Flamingo missiles were used in the strike.
The strike targeted the territory of the Russian Federation, specifically referring to attacks deep inside Russian territory at a distance of more than 300 kilometers. These are exclusively Ukrainian strike assets. These include strike drones such as the Bober, as well as aeroballistic strike systems, either the Long Neptune or accordingly the Flamingo.
In addition to missiles, Russian strategic facilities were attacked by drones, which the Russian armed forces decided to shoot down directly over residential buildings. There is no talk of Russian control over the city of Pokrovsk or of the operational encirclement of the Ukrainian Defense Forces group. This was stated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Syrsky.
According to the occupiers themselves, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have achieved tactical successes in the Pokrovsk direction, particularly in the area of Shakov. The Ukrainian Defense Forces have also managed to significantly improve their tactical position in the area of Rodinsk. In the so-called Dobropilya direction, the occupiers have been forced to acknowledge the successful nature of the Ukrainian Defense Forces counterattacks aimed at preventing the expansion of the enemy's presence in areas where they have breached Ukrainian defenses.
In these shots, Ukrainian defenders carried out a fire raid and cleared enemy positions in Donbass. A similar situation awaited the Russian invaders in the Kupiansk area. Meanwhile, in the Sumy region, the occupiers tried to get behind the Ukrainian armed forces, but as a result, half of them were immediately eliminated. The rest decided to retreat and regroup with other units. Russian propaganda is calling for the destruction of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and other Ukrainian cities.
At the same time, we warned from the start. They do not understand, we carry it out.
The Russian armed forces want a major war and are preparing to start it on the European continent in 2029 or 2030, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
A possible scenario is also not ruled out, the so-called Suwalki corridor, meaning the creation of a land corridor that, according to the Russian dictator's plan, would connect the Republic of Belarus with the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad Oblast. And accordingly, it would pass through the territory of Poland and the Baltic states.
Meanwhile, the head of Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that Ukraine is prepared to fight for another 3 years and wear Putin down.
The losses of the Russian occupation army have already exceeded 1 million. It is precisely these massive losses in personnel that are connected to the latest decrees of the Russian dictator. This is a year-round conscription into the armed forces of the occupying country's army. And secondly, it involves bringing in so-called reservists to guard key strategic sites. Essentially, this amounts to a covert mobilization.
Within a few weeks, Ukraine is preparing to launch the world's first comprehensive drone wall, designed to destroy Russian attack drones. According to one of the founders of the developer company, the system has already been sent to our country.
Russian troops are advancing in the Zaporizhzhia area. What exactly is happening there? In the report.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation have shifted their priorities and launched an offensive on another section of the front.
As of today, Russian occupation forces have concentrated their main strike in the Zaporizhzhia region on encircling Huliaipole from the east and north sides.
On the Zaporizhzhia axis, Russian troops are increasing the pressure.
To achieve this, they recently crossed the Yanchul River, which allowed them to directly reach the settlements of Sladkoye, Ravnopolye, as well as Yablokovoye.
The occupiers are rapidly advancing towards Zaporizhzhia and bypassing the defensive line through the Dnipropetrovsk region, S.
To the north, along that same Yanchel River, Russian occupation forces are also trying to increase pressure on the Dnipropetrovsk region, moving toward Pokrovsk through the interfluve of the Volchya and Varanaya rivers, and again along the Yanchel on both the right and left bank. In the
direction of Huliaipol, the occupiers are trying to cut off Ukrainian logistical routes along two highways.
They will establish a connection to Pokrovsk, and then they will simply have logistical support, pushing in as many as 10 army units onto this bridgehead, creating troop density, and then forming a strike towards Zaporizhzhia.
The Russian command is giving increasing priority to the Huliaipol direction. Reinforcements are being transferred here from the Dobropilya direction from near Pokrovsk. The situation near Huliaipol is tense. The American Institute for the Study of War also reports on this. Since the end of August 2025, Putin's army has managed to capture about 250 square kilometers of territory. Deep State shows that the front line is less than 1 kilometer south of Huliaipol and 6 kilometers northeast of the city.
Mainly moving through forest belts and fields, they are advancing towards Selinaya Balka, which is a landscape reserve located south of Ravnopol. Essentially, only a few kilometers remain to Huliaipol, about 5 to 7 kilometers depending on the direction.
The day before, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, spoke about a significant deterioration of the situation in the Huliaipol direction.
The situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipol directions, where the enemy, taking advantage of their numerical superiority in manpower and equipment, advanced during fierce fighting and captured 3 settlements. The military groupings of the southern forces are engaged in exhausting battles for Ravnopilya and Yablokove. Appropriate support measures are being taken. The aggressor has suffered significant losses from combined fire.
Recently, Russian war correspondents have also been reporting on the situation in the Huliaipol direction. Units of the Vostok group of forces are advancing on the Ukrainian city.
You have to watch your step very carefully because there are a lot of mines, and you need to constantly keep an eye on the sky because their unmanned aerial vehicles are flying around, FPVs, drones, and Mavics.
This is the Russians' new operational concept: gradual depletion of Ukrainian defenses using infiltration tactics. According to Ukrainian military sources, the enemy is suffering significant losses during attempts to advance. Huliaipol is a very important settlement in the defense of Zaporizhzhia. War correspondents also note this.
After Guliaipol, there will be Orakov, and then, apart from Kamishuvaka and Stepnogorsk, there will be nothing to stop the enemy from getting closer to the southern outskirts of Zaporizhzhia. This will also affect the PGT. Pokrovsk. If the enemy captures it, he will be able to reach Volnyansk.
The Russian army is systematically carrying out airstrikes on Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The footage shows the aftermath of Russia's terrorist acts. Vehicles have been destroyed, buildings have been ruined. This is the center of the settlement. The Russians plan to strike at the rear to complicate supply lines, destroy logistics and drone operators, as well as to carry out targeted penetrations behind the lines. After that, small assault groups conduct operations, trying to advance quickly and force Ukrainian units to abandon their positions.
But this is such a negative development that it could become a precursor to the formation of a foothold and conditions for the Russian occupation forces, which in the future could even allow them to organize an offensive towards Zaporizhzhia.
Volodymyr Zelensky visited the front in the Zaporizhzhia region on a working trip. He listened to reports from the commanders.
Good health to you guys. Glory to Ukraine. Glory.
Thank you for what you do for defending Ukraine. Despite the enemy's efforts, the fighting continues. The best assault units are fighting for every inch of our land.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Amid everything shown and said today, new information is emerging that the Kremlin is pushing for talks between Kiev and Moscow, allegedly trying to get what it wants through Washington. Next, we'll look at whether there are any open pathways for direct talks between Zelensky and Putin and what role Donald Trump could play in the peace process.
Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have been suspended. According to Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya, Putin refuses to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, and meetings with the Russian delegation in Istanbul have yielded no tangible results.
Under a dictatorship, it is impossible to have productive discussions with negotiating teams representing the dictator. They have a very strict mandate, and they must defend the position they've been instructed to uphold.
As a result of the negotiations in Istanbul in the spring and summer of 2025, Russia did not change its previous demands, including those regarding the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine.
They are well aware of our position. They have, as I already mentioned previously, our official position in writing. It's not a secret at all. It was announced by President Putin in June 2024 when he spoke at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
At the same time, Lavrov stated that the Kremlin still hopes for a meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. But the White House no longer believes in the Kremlin's empty promises.
Moscow's intentions can only be judged by its actions, and it has made it clear what it wants. It wants the rest of Donetsk region, and obviously Ukraine will not agree to that. Right now, we see that Russia continues to carry out long-range strikes on Ukrainian territory, apparently to destroy its energy system and, so to speak, demoralize the country.
Right now, Russian diplomacy is trying to shift the blame for the breakdown of negotiations onto Ukraine. Moscow has no intention of ending the war, but at the same time, the Kremlin does not want to be left without a dialogue with Washington.
The Russians are now trying to somehow shake up, well, this diplomatic ice, to break it in various ways, both through formal diplomacy and informally. Right now, they're working through the G7 and other communication channels. They have tried, or most likely tried, to resume once again the Istanbul negotiation process. But in any case, the Russians are not ready to accept Trump's ultimatum, and Trump's ultimatum is very simple. Any political negotiations will only begin when the fighting stops.
According to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Washington has practically exhausted its potential to strengthen sanctions against Russia and will now focus on enforcing the existing restrictions. And once again, the White House is urging its European colleagues to put more pressure on Russia, particularly regarding Putin's shadow fleet.
It is also important for Europe to participate in this negotiation process, because after all, this is a war taking place on European territory, and Europe, one way or another, plays a significant role in ensuring, let's say, the overall framework of European security.
When it comes to ending the war in Ukraine, the White House administration will no longer fall for Putin's tricks, such as the empty negotiations in Istanbul with the pseudo-historian Medinsky or the fruitless talks in Alaska.
Trump won't agree to another Anchorage, Alaska, another political slap in the face from Putin, because I think he's already tired of getting slapped by Putin. It only undermines his ratings.
Under significant sanctions pressure, Putin will likely have to abandon his maximalist demands and agree to direct negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and see you next time.